Well, to the group, couple of background things for you to recognize. We do have a social media that I want everybody to take advantage of. We've got a YouTube account. We have a Facebook account, TikTok. I guess it's still around at this point. We'll see how that goes. Instagram as well. Please follow those. You'll get some information from us from time to time. Our newsletter went out today, rather lengthy on some things. It only goes out to our members only at the early stage. It'll be up on our website sometime next week. But if you want to get a hold of that early on, join us. It's $25 a year for the entire household. We need your memberships. They helps us to be able to get information from you that we're able then to convey on to our councilman. I think very frankly, also the more people that we have, they're able to respond to our councilman, the better off he's able to listen to us too, because he knows that we're trying to be fair and reasonable about the issues that we bring up to him. Along that line, you will see coming out probably within the next week or so a survey that we're going to send out to all of our group. And I see Ari, you've just come on as well. Ari, if you want to explain what's going on with that survey, that will be great.
Oh, sure. We're just taking a survey of priorities that we want to know what you think is important, and we'll be sending out an email and posting it on our social media. So we'd appreciate if anybody can take the time to fill it out, give us your thoughts, your voice and thoughts matter to us. So we want to hear from you what you think the priorities are and your concerns are for the community.
As we start off this new year, it's important to recognize that there are a lot of challenges to us, especially with things that have happened with the wildfires around and going forward. There's going to be a lot of challenges to our communities in a lot of areas, and we have a new federal administration. There's the interactions with our local administration is going to potentially change some of the things we're going to need to keep our eyes and ears open to. So that survey will be very important to us to make sure that we're focused on doing the things that you as the members want us to do. And again, if you're not a member, please join us. Go over to the website that you signed in on at WHHO.com. You'll find good information there from time to time, and you can register and use PayPal. It comes up with any credit card you want to through that one. It's only $25 a year. So enough of that shameless plugs, if you will, for membership, but please do join us. We'll be pleased to have you with us. Another issue we wanted just to make for clarification was about the In-N-Out Burger. There's been some media has been going around and some rumors. I think we dealt with this last month as well. There was some indications that it was a Woodland Hills community group that was involved in objecting to that over there. That is not us. It's another group that's called West Valley Alliance for Optimal Living. It is basically represented by one individual, a good person, very frankly, and hopefully that we'll be able to interface with him on some of those other issues too that are going on there. But it's not us. We haven't done anything concerning that In-N-Out Burger that's over there, basically on Ventura Boulevard, around by Shoot. Next meeting will be on February the 26th. It's going to be an interesting one, I think. It sounds like it's going to be a bit dull, but I have a feeling it won't be. The LA City Planning Director, Vince Bertoni, is going to be joining us, and we're going to go over a lot of the things that are going on with our planning and what's going on with a lot of issues here. In the newsletter, you'll see that I've reprinted out the materials concerning the CHIP. That's going to be interesting because the incentive program is going to be having a dramatic effect upon us. And I know the councilman will probably talk about this too, that he had opposed some of the attempts to try to basically impose a lot of what they were going to do in our single family home residential areas. And there's been a movement, I think, out of Sacramento to try to destroy all the single family homes and basically turn them into all basically apartments. And we have to watch that and be on top of that. We'll be able to have a chance next month, to talk to Vince about that. So for tonight, we are very, very pleased and honored, very frankly, to have a councilman with us. He's been very generous with his time in the past and is tonight as well. One of the some background for him, if I may, and then I'll have him swear in our board members. And why don't we do that first, Bob? Let's go ahead and swear in the board members first, and we'll talk about who you are and where you came from.
Sure.
Let's go ahead.
All right.
Instead of swearing at us, let's do a swear us in.
All right. So all the new board members should raise their right hand.
That's
And I'll read your oath. You just repeat after me.
We'll do it.
Say, I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
to support and follow
to support and follow
the bylaws of the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization
the bylaws of the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and to represent the needs of its members,
and to represent the needs of its members,
to work to retain the unique character
to work to retain the unique character
of the Woodland Hills community,
of the Woodland Hills community,
and to diligently work
and to diligently work
to make Woodland Hills a better place
to make Woodland Hills a better place
in which to live,
which
work,
to live,
and play.
work, and play. Amen.
All right.
Thank
Couldn't
you, sir.
see everybody's hand because I only see the people here, but I'm assuming everybody's hand was up. So by the power vested in me as your city council member and having this honorary ability to read this in, I now pronounce you all official board members once again.
Thank you for that. We deeply appreciate that, Councilman. As most you know, Bob has been serving this community for quite a period of time. Lives here in Woodland Hills with his wife and two kids. I think that's important to recognize that the decisions he makes, he has to live with in a lot of ways too. The third district that he,
although John, that's changed this year. Now I only have one kid living at home because I have one who's at college. Believe it or not.
Well,
Wow.
And I've known you all since I had since I only had one kid, and then the other one was born. And
I know
it's been a long time, and but now I have one off in college.
It has indeed. Well, the councilman's got most of the southwestern portion of the San Fernando Valley, includes Canoga Park, Reseda, Tarzana, Winnetka, and of course Woodland Hills. Originally was elected to city council back in March of 2013. Before that, he served in the state assembly from 2008 to 2013 as well. Graduated from Duke University and UCLA's Anderson School of Management. You assumed the office in 2013 as council member, and you were reelected outright at the primary back in June of 22. Your term ends, unfortunately, on December the 14th of 2026. So you've got a year, 2 years basically, a little bit short of that, to be able to, again, effectuate some good things here for the community. I think it's important for everybody to understand that presently you are the president pro tem of the city council. We'll ask you a little bit about what that is and what that really entails. Also vice chair of the budget and finance committee, member of the housing and homeless committee. One that I think is very important to us. You now chair the planning and land use committee, which is known as PLUM, and a member of the ad hoc committee on the 2028 Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games as well. And we'll be bugging you to see how we're going to be able to, everybody can get the best seats, the best tickets for that as the time goes on. So, Councilman, I'm going to turn it over to you and talk about those things that were basically your successes in this past year and your hopes for the future that's going on, and maybe even a few things that keep you awake at night, and how you're going to hopefully be able to solve those. And then we'll open up to a lot of questions for individuals and for me and from the board members as well. So I'll turn it over to you, and I will go ahead and pin you so that everybody can look at you rather than looking at us. And it's turned over to you now, sir. Thank you. Again, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, John. It is always a pleasure to see you. And on my screen, I see Dennis and Scott and Ari, and I know that the rest of you are out there. I've had the pleasure of knowing many of you for many years and work. Always whenever you ask me to come to this group, I'm always happy to do so. Really to hear what you're thinking and to work with you and come up with ideas. Many of you have come up with some really creative ideas I've been able to help implement. And I always appreciate your feedback. And I view this, my job as a council member is a partnership, is working with you to make our community better in any and every way we can. Starting just with the very last thing you said to start, you mentioned the Olympics. I wouldn't just think about tickets, but how can we need to think about how do we activate our space in Woodland Hills and in the West Valley when the Olympics come? One idea just to get your juices flowing is to have like the Warner Center Park be an activation zone where we have viewings and have some of the games on the screens and have special events and that kind of thing. So there's a lot that we can do beyond just enjoying the Olympics in that way. But let me talk more generally about a lot of different things, and really, like always with this, I want to spend most of the time on questions and talking about the issues that you want to talk about or hearing what you have to say. I certainly want to start out by talking about the fires. That has obviously been the big disaster crisis of our time right now, the immediate crisis, which will be, is proving to be probably the costliest natural disaster in our nation's history. We're talking about damages that will probably be running north of $300 billion. It's unfathomable. I think about, I sort of cut my teeth on the Northridge earthquake. Back then, I was working for Howard Berman in '94 when the earthquake hit, and I became the point person for earthquake recovery. And I spent the next year and a half, almost 2 years, working with some of you here on this call, but also working with businesses and nonprofits and SBA and FEMA on the recovery. Back then, people thought we'd be ghost towns in the valley. We would never be able to go back. We did come back, but that one was a $14 billion federal funding, and this is going to far exceed that. We were very lucky in a sense in the third district, I should say, in that we didn't have any actual houses or structures burn. The edge of the Kenneth fire was in Woodland Hills. It caused many of us to be preparing for evacuation. My family had to, we got the evacuation order and we packed up our stuff, but we didn't actually, they reversed that before we actually left. But I know many of you may have had that same experience. But the fire, which started off in the western part of Woodland Hills, fortunately, at that time, the wind was blowing west. And so it blew away from us. But that was quite a scare for a lot of folks. I was actually, when I heard of the fire, I was at they were doing the bundles of kindness thing at Temple Aliyah, and which is right there, and close to Valley Circle, and we basically had to. With bundles of kindness, it was a young woman had put together this project where she's collecting things for homeless and had lots of people there. That had to just end. Everybody had to evacuate, and that was the fire that was starting to get serious at that point. But that fire and the Palisades fire, we all saw it from our own vantage point, but it fortunately never crossed Mulholland, and that was critical because if it had, we could have been very easily like the Palisades. So, in that sense, we count our lucky stars and thank God that we didn't burn. But it's a reminder of how tenuous things are and how we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can moving forward to protect ourselves and becoming more fire not only resilient but protecting ourselves, making sure the brush is clear, all the things that we need to do. Now, as far as the city goes, this fire is going to be a major expense. We are working with FEMA. I had a meeting today about we're going to be hiring some major contractors to be helping with that. You probably read about Steve Soberoff has been brought on to kind of focus on Palisades Village, but that is one small piece of the overall rehabilitation that has to happen. And I don't know, I've been out there now a couple of times. It is devastating. It looks like a movie set, except the smell makes you realize that this is very real. And looking out, you see these chimneys that are basically like tombstones spread out across the way. It's very devastating. But you all know this. But the issues we now deal with is dealing with the contamination, because the fires, in the modern world, it's not just the trees and vegetation, but it's your batteries and your cars and all these things that create environmental toxins. So step one is going to be removing those toxins. The Army Corps of Engineers is basically going to take lead on that. Folks are going to be allowed to remove their own, or they can basically opt in, and the Corps is going to remove all the debris. But that is going to be obviously the very first and most important step. But that's also complicated. We can get into that, but we've got lead, asbestos, all sorts of things. Anyway, I've been spending a lot of time on the fire issues. In fact, today we had in council, it went very late. I just got back here after a number of things because there were some folks, there are a lot of emergency measures that have been put in place, and then there There were some that we couldn't agree on as a council, and today was one of those that took a lot of time, where some of my colleagues wanted to use the fires to put together a ban, a freeze on all rent across the city, and a eviction moratorium, essentially, because of the fires. And myself and a number of other folks thought that was a big overreach in terms of, you know, having an unintended major negative consequence on our housing providers and on our market. So we were able to turn that back and send that back to committee. And so that got sent back to committee after a very long discussion, and I put forward a motion to use the ULA, some of the ULA money, to provide direct rental assistance to some of the folks that are displaced, not just the people who were in the homes, but the gardeners and the housekeepers and the people who worked in Palisades Village and those kinds of folks, to have a program in place that goes directly to the folks that need it, as opposed to what was being proposed, which in my view was a sledgehammer to a problem that needs a scalpel. So there's all sorts of ancillary issues that come up with regards to the fire.
Bob, if I may, the fires I think is going to be on everybody's mind. If I got a few questions, I guess, if I may, sort of interrupt you, and I'll come back to letting you get on to some other ones. But the problem that we saw in Palisades was the water pressure. Do we have any problems like that out here that you're aware of? And has it been checked within recent times to make sure that we're not going to have those type of problems out here if we do have those winds that turn around and start getting into our hillsides here, or even onto the floor of the valley too?
Yeah, I mean, the water pressure is a very real issue, and the water systems that we have throughout the city are not set up to battle a major fire like this. They're set up to battle a couple of smaller fires or one big fire, but not what we were experiencing. And so we ended up with that system where the water pressure went down. Now, what in the after action reports I've seen, that wasn't really the, even if that hadn't happened, the fire wouldn't be all that different, is what they're saying. But there's going to be a lot of after action reports on that.
Well, there was claims that DWP had in fact told the firefighters to quit using their hoses on some areas because they didn't have the resources of the water to be using, and also the reservoirs weren't filled up. Can you fill us in on any information that you found out about that with
Sure.
DWP?
Yeah, there's a number of things. The reservoir, there was one of the reservoirs there was not filled because there had been a tear in the covering of it, and so it was on its routine basically to be fixed. And now that was a reservoir that basically fed into part of the system, the gravity system, but it was drained at the time of the fires. Now
That seems to be sort of. I mean, somebody wasn't watching what they're doing. I mean, even our own big reservoir up there, if I'm not mistaken, they have large plastic balls that they put on top of it that basically cover it so that it doesn't have the evaporation. It doesn't have to have a cover that eventually is going to split. And I think it's just people just scratching their head going, somebody was really asleep at the switch on that one. And again, we're going to hear all the time that it would not have made a difference. I have to tell you, if I was there and had my garden hose going and there was nothing coming out of it, I would wonder whether or not, it might be something that might have been helpful. What's being
Sure.
done with that? Who's being called on the carpet for that, or is there any investigations going on by city council?
there's a ton of different after action reports and investigations going on right now on sort of every aspect of this that you can possibly imagine. And I've had a report from the city attorney and from a number of folks trying to figure out the city's liability and what was the story with that reservoir, because of course that's a DWP reservoir. DWP is owned by all of us as a city asset, and as they talked about it, I mean, they actually wanted to, at one point they wanted to keep it partially filled while they fixed it, and then they were ordered by the state not to do that because the water could be contaminated, so that they, it had been drained. But again, from everything I've heard, and I've heard a lot of these after action reports, that was not, what everything is a contribution, right? I mean, there's a million things that go on, but that was not that would not have changed the outcome of the fire.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned before that our system is not really set up to handle large fires like this, really much more for smaller ones. I know in my own neighborhood, I've got a fire hydrant that's only about 300 feet from me, and
Right.
right at a Y portion of the roadway, and I'm up in the hills. But that fire hydrant only has one outlet on it, and it's a 5.5 inch outlet that is basically for a fire engine to connect up to. Nobody put a hose on that one. And if you were to put a fire engine there with it connected up, it's going to block that Y intersection, and people are going to have problems on being able to get exits out of those locations. I mean, those type of things I think need to be. I think we have an opportunity now, certainly through your guidance, to actually start having the fire departments go around and check and see whether or not we are up to speed on being able to handle something like this and what corrections need to be done. I mean, I'm looking at that fire hydrant should really be replaced and should have a couple of smaller outlets on it as well as the big 5 inch one, so that we can get some hoses on it.
And even probably, I think more salient is there may need that fire hydrant system, the fire system may need to have a separate water supply than the regular water outlets, because what ends up happening in these fires is that and what happened here, I mean, the reason why the pressure went down in part was because everybody turned on their hoses and their water outlets to try to stop the fire, and as the fire would burst different water pipes, the pressure would those would just be running water, and the pressure would go down. And so the more and more that happened, basically they ran out of the pressure because there was.
We understand that. Two things. One, sprinkler systems are generally on an electrical box that's controlling them. If the electricity goes out in that area, those things shut down. So your sprinklers aren't going to work. So people are using hoses up in those locations. That's a different story to that if they're on an outside circuit. But yeah, I think you're right that we need to make sure that water's being fed both through the fire hydrants from a different source than what the homeowners are getting at that point, to watch the pressures and what have you. But I think now is the time, certainly for us to begin to look and see and learn from this what we can do for the future. And on those lines, I'm up in the hillsides, and I've talked to a lot of the neighbors up here. The neighbors are really disappointed with the fact that all the fire department had gone someplace else, which they should have, and they needed to go there. But as a result, we had nobody up here. And if something had broken out up here and there were embers floating around, we had no abilities other than just our little garden hoses to do it. I would like to, and we're going to encourage, and at least the group that I'm with up here, along with the homeowners too, is to encourage that the fire department and the city do something with volunteer firemen, of people that are able and to do that, to get trained with the fire department, to be able to handle that stuff, and to have some hoses that are available to us with stuff. And I understand from having talked to the fire department that those hoses are recycled from time to time, and they're basically put out for auction and gone away. There's plenty of hoses that are probably available for a volunteer fire department, if you will, to have them available in our own local neighborhoods. And yes, I recognize there's potential liability for the city for them doing it, people jumping over phone. We can sign waivers and all that stuff and what have you. But bottom line is most of these houses get destroyed, as we're hearing, from embers that are being blown in that mile or 2 mile distance. And that's where people who are staying, who are knowledgeable, who are trained, that can actually do something to keep those embers from igniting, to where the fire department can actually fight those big ones they actually have to fight. So
Yeah,
I'd like to see something done with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in fact, the ember issue, it's very interesting. The fire, we need to be up to speed on all of our fire codes. One of the ones I heard talked about it during this fire is that a lot of homes have not been retrofitted with the latest requirements when it comes to the vents on your attic area, your crawl space, and that is apparently one of the biggest things that you can do to prevent those embers from catching your house on fire. A lot of these homes got on fire because the embers would burn, they'd float around, and basically a tiny little ember would get into someone's attic and hit the insulation, and then that would catch up that entire house. And they now have building codes that require a metal mesh that really helps prevent that. And that you see some of the houses like in the Palisades that survived when all these others didn't. Many of them, it's because they were either different building materials, they were up to code on those kinds of things, like the mesh, which I'm apparently told is one of the biggest things, and actually one of the least expensive things that you can do to just make a.
You're 100% right with that. And for those that are listening, that is something that they should either do themselves or have a handyman. It needs to be a metal one, not a plastic one, because the plastic ones obviously will melt. It needs to be very, very fine mesh. They can go into their attic and staple it over those particular openings that are there. Another thing that most people don't recognize too, Bob, is that their rain gutters will get filled up with leaves and what have you in it. And the embers can come in those things, and those things will light up when you get a 50-mile-an-hour wind, and it's going to be right there, get up underneath the tiles on your roof, and it's going to set it up too. So, and there is one more thing I have to direct to you as well, because it happened with me again up here on the hillsides. A lot of the owners of property, especially the vacant properties, are not clearing them, and they've got a lot of old dead trees and branches that are on them, and nobody's clearing them off. We had one that was fairly close to me that they cited the individual quite a bit, and the fire department finally hired somebody to come out and clean it up and to put a lien on the property for what they did for that. And in talking to the fellow, I said, this is very good, but there's a whole bunch of other places I think you need to look at. He looked at me and says, John, unfortunately, the fire department has no longer have any monies to be able to hire anybody to go out and do that. And I'm going, that's nuts. I mean, when we hear that 170 some odd $million was being cut from the budget, we should be able to find some money someplace to have those properties cleared out, especially up in the hillsides where you have an empty lot and it's got nothing but just a bunch of trash or dead trees on it that would light up too quickly. And the fire department just can't seem to do anything because they don't have enough money to be able to do it. I would hope that the city would be able to do something through your office with some funds that are available for exactly that, for good cleanup.
Yeah, no, in fact, you mentioned the budget. I want to clear, in this fire, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation. There was some misinformation when it comes to the fire department's budget. There was all sorts of talk about $17 million having been cut from the fire department's budget. And while I would agree, the fire department never has enough funding, no one ever has enough funding. But speaking as I was the budget chair at the time, the fire department didn't get a $17 million cut. They got more than a $50 million increase this last year. But one of the reasons why it was so confusing for folks was because, unlike the police department that had completed its labor contracts and all of its funding was contained within its budget, because it was an open contract with the fire department, which happened after the police department, the fire department raises were not included in the budget, but instead that money was put in a set aside, what's called an unallocated balance, that was set aside for as soon as those raises would be effectuated. And they were effectuated the next couple of months. There was never a question that they were, they have a Me Too clause, so they were going to get basically what the police got, but it had to be worked out. And then once that got worked out, all those folks were getting paid. So the actual fire department budget was substantially more than the previous year. And in fact, you mentioned the hand crews. That was something that the fire department didn't get in the mayor's proposed budget, but they came to the council, and the council added that into the budget for additional money for hand crews for the fire department, because that is so important. That was one of their top priorities. So all of those things were funded, and it's often confusing about how that budget works. If people have questions, I could throw a slide up that shows you the actual numbers on the fire department.
I think we can, as I say, I guess statistics and numbers of that can give us all kinds of a headache as the evening goes on for tonight. But we recognize that it's in your hands. We trust you with it, and you need to just recognize that while you're down on the flatlands, some of us are up here on the hillsides, see a lot of problems that are going on with a lot of these areas that are just tender. And with an ember that's coming across, and with those type of winds, I could tell you, I've been in hurricanes with 180 mile an hour winds. I was walking on outside when those winds came through up here, and they were whipping around. They weren't just coming from one direction. It was pretty fierce. I've got one more item for you, and then I see that Jim's got his hand up, and I know he's got some issues that are there too. There was a lot of people that were very disturbed about their animals and their pets not being able to get them. And as we recognize, a lot of people that day had gone off to work and were away from their homes. And now when the evacuation is declared, they can't get back in to get their animals at that point. As you know, we've got animal services that have those trucks that run around that have those little bends in them when they find a stray on the sidewalk someplace. They'll put them and then take them to one of the shelters. I would encourage you as a city council member to put in place that whenever there's that type of fire, that those vehicles get deployed to those particular locations, and that the individuals were able to call into one specific number or what have you to direct those people to be able to go to a specific location to get their animals back out of that. And these times people are looking for those animals as basically comfort animals. We see a lot of that since 9/11, I guess, in a lot of ways.
The city actually set that up. didn't do it fast enough, but that was actually one of the issues I raised with the EOC on day one of the fire, because I've been hearing about that. And
Yeah.
the Animal Services set up a number. They did a partnership with a nonprofit organization that specializes in doing that. And people would call in, say where their house is. They would send somebody over, and they got a lot of pets out that way.
I understand, but it just seems to me that there are easy resources that the city has with not having to look to the volunteers that they can deploy it immediately. And then they get the volunteers to come in afterwards on that. I think that's something that I would hope that the city can get straightened out, that should be, when something like this happens, there should be a checklist that goes off and people should be immediately responding all the way around in all those particular areas. And the other thing that goes on too is people don't know what's happened to their homes. Why the heck can't we do it? We've been seeing on air where they're showing within a day's worth of time satellite photographs of befores and afters. And you can see very clearly where your house used to be by the before and now where it's not afterwards. That stuff should be available to the public immediately. And the city should be paying for whatever services need to be able to put those satellites over to do that so that people can have a comfort level of where they are. Sometimes not knowing is much more of an anxious feeling for everybody than actually knowing it. If they know their home is gone, they can move on and start going. But if they don't know what the heck they're going to be able to do. Even with having a Google truck, once the fires get down there, have one of the Google trucks go through and map the particular area and be able to have that up so people can take a look online and put their address in and see what it looks like at that location. I think it'd be very helpful for a lot of the stress factors and keep people out of the streets. And along with the item of the streets, I think that we have some problems up here with substandard streets, especially up where I live at. And I know that we have a question, I think, that's coming from Jim, if I'm not mistaken. Jim, let me get you. You go ahead and unmute yourself, Jim.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sure can. Go ahead. I think you got a question concerning the roads up in the area too.
Okay. Hi, Bob. This is Jim Heimler, 16th Tee of the Woodland Hills Country Club. I've been working with your office, mayor's office, fire planning, city attorney, planning commissioners, trying to get our streets safe. And I guess in the last 2 years, we've gotten nothing accomplished. So I'm trying to find out what more I'm supposed to do. We've got the issue being, when you build a house, you have to widen the street. The city is not enforcing rules. And the hillside soil, uphill slopes, we're letting, like on Morrow, we're down to one lane because we got 5 feet, 6 feet of dirt on there for the last 6 years. We've got no enforcement of parking. People are parking under red parking, red flag day signs during the fire. Nobody cared. We've got cars sticking out, parking and then parking into the street, blocking traffic. We've got landscaping covering, partial lanes. We got trash cans on red flag days out, blocking traffic everywhere. This kind of stuff's going on. It's real easy to fix. I know down at the rear gate of the Woodland Hills Country Club on Rios, the trees had fallen, knocked down the one no parking sign on a blind corner. So I spent 6 months or more trying to get the one sign put up, and instead somebody came up and put no parking signs on the entire street, both sides of the street, 125 feet. So now I have no parking on the streets. So it means as a senior or having guests where seniors are disabled, you basically have made that impossible. So everything's going backwards. I can park at the top of the street right in front of a fire hydrant legally and block the whole intersection, and the city's fine with that. So I walked the neighborhood with Seth. I've been sending emails, photos to Seth and John and everybody else in the city, and I have the 311. I've got the registration numbers. Nobody is doing anything, and I don't know what to do. I'm used to being able to get things accomplished. So your turn.
Sure. No, and I know you're working closely with my team to try to figure this out. I know you've been working with Seth and with John, and your street was, the fire department went up there and basically said that it was dangerous to have the parking there. That's why they mandated on their own that the parking can't happen on your street because it's too small, and I guess too much of an artery. So part of it is that it was substandard, right? So either we have to expand that street to make it, but that means cutting into the properties and figuring that out, or the fire department's not going to change on what's substandard unless we can make physical changes to that street. So these are not, you've got a number of complicated issues that we're not going to be able to solve here on this call, but I know that you've been spending a lot of time with my team and trying to figure out what the angles are and how we're going to be able to do it. There are a lot of property violations that are causing some of these issues as well, and folks can get cited for those things, and then sometimes it's a question of enforcement on some of the streets where you are seeing the blockage of getting the enforcement out there.
Bob, we have, as you know, substandard streets that are up here, and as we saw happen over in Sunset, with the cars trying to get out and evacuate, they were blocking up on each other. People had to get out and walk, and the Oakland
and then
fire.
Once one person gets out and walks, then their car is blocking everything.
Absolutely. In the Oakland fire, most of the people that were killed out of the Oakland fire were killed inside their cars. They felt that they could stay in their cars and let it blow over them, and people don't realize there's no oxygen. They can't breathe, and they're just it's an incinerator once they get in those cars. And there needs to be, I think, and your office may be able to do this with some of the publications you do, to educate the people up, especially on the hillsides and down on the flatlands too, that there needs to be an evacuation route. And the people need to know that if they have to, for whatever reason, the car conks out on them or whatever, they need to get it off the road so that they're not blocking it. And they need to have a place where they can go. I keep telling everybody, for example, at the Woodland Hills golf course, talked to them ages ago, if there's a big fire up there, they should unlock those gates so people can at least walk into that area and get into an area away from homes, away from where there might be fires at least. And I know when I talked to the fire department, they said they basically would come from Mulholland and begin to work north if they had to work on any fires from there. So I think there needs to be a lot more communication with the community that I think that you can spearhead with the fire departments. It might be with, lectures going on or town halls or whatever, to educate people on what they can do, what they shouldn't be doing, what are the best things to be up to. And I think this is the time to do it now. I think people are ripe to be able to hear about it. And I'm hoping to have maybe in March to have one of the fire department's chiefs come out with us too.
Yeah, no, out of a crisis comes opportunity. And in fact, we've got the Bureau of Engineering is currently conducting a hillside study, evaluating which streets are important for evacuation routes, because that's a key part of this. Similarly with in the Palisades, I co-authored a measure with Tracy Park, whose district it is, to make sure that as they build back, a lot of people are calling for a lot of density in a lot of areas, but to say you've got to also take into consideration the evacuation routes, because you cannot just build without careful looking at the evacuation routes, because there are a lot of competing interests, but the fire and the evacuation have got to be paramount as we look at these things.
Yeah, it seems that to be the case too. Well, I unceremoniously interrupted your presentation before, but I know you have other things you want to talk about, so I'll put it back over to you to talk about some of the other things, and to finish up with this, and we'll go back and take some more questions too.
Sure, I'll try to touch briefly on a bunch of things, but you guys, of course, know that we just had the second 5-year Warner Center specific plan update. The Warner Center plan was something. Worked with a number of you, but it was in my very first term, first year, we were able to get that over the finish line, and that has had a dramatic impact on this area. You all were part of that process, but we just issued the second 5-year review. These are reviews that are required. It's good news. I mean, there were 15 projects added, thousands of apartments to the neighborhood. There's roughly, as you know, 40 million square feet of approved or built development in the Warner Center, nearly half of which is accounted for by office towers. Of the net 19 million square feet approved or built for non-residential floor, less than 3 million though has come since 2008. Most of the growth has been residential. To date, we have over 17,000 net residential units that have been built or approved, which is an increase of over 11,000 since 2008. There's now nearly 22,000 built or approved parking spaces in the Warner Center. 7,300 approved or built bicycle parking spaces, 5.7 acres of open space. And there's been a lot of large scale developments. You guys have been part of all of them, ranging from just to list off the Mirror Apartments. That's 174. We had on Van Owen Street another 100, ground floor commercial. I could go through all of them, but there's been a lot of development in the area, and we can talk about that. exciting recently since our last time, and the Rams have their practice facility up and running, and as I understand it, pretty soon they're going to present to all of us what they plan on doing with the bulk of the property that they own, which, as many of you know, they not only own the Anthem site, but they own the Promenade Mall, as well as the Village, but they're not making major changes on the Village. So that is going to be the biggest change in our area, and we're going to hear a lot about that this coming year.
Bob, if I may, I got a question that came in from Carr, who's over at the neighborhood council, that was pointing out that there apparently is a proposal for 334 unit apartment buildings. Well, we know there's a lot more that's going on and a lot that's needed, but they're only going to have 156 parking spaces on an inappropriate site. I'm reading from her comment here, in the middle of an established neighborhood. The builder is using the density bonus issues in order to be able to do that, to do low income housing on that, to get away from the parking stuff. The site's close to a fire area. Most of the neighborhoods are receiving an evaluation notices relating to they got the Kenneth fire, they were getting notices from that stuff. So I think the bottom line is, we got a lot of building that still is going on out here. There's a lot that's being done by the state and by the city too, that's trying to increase our density. We know with the CHIP program that's coming in, and we're going to talk with Vince next month, I think a lot more details with that too. But where are you standing with that, and what's happening with our assault, if you will, that's going on with our neighborhoods, with getting away with the single family homes, and secondly with permitting these buildings to go up where they don't have enough parking spaces. And as you know, south of Ventura Boulevard up to Mulholland, they want to have that go into 5-story apartment buildings with some incentives to where they may not have to have a whole lot of parking on that too. That's going to change everything out here in a short period of time. Where do you stand on that, and what can you do, and what can we do to make sure that our community stays a good community?
Well, you mentioned the CHIP, and I won't go into too much of that because you're going to spend time with Vince on that. But the good news on that is, there were folks who wanted to expand CHIP into single family neighborhoods, and several of my colleagues and myself, we were able to vote against that expansion because that wasn't vetted very well by those who would be impacted, which is all folks who live out here in single family neighborhoods. So while expanding CHIP might be appropriate in some places, and that's what the conversation with Vince will be about, I wanted to make sure you understood that came up, and the single family neighborhoods were protected because of that vote and because we moved forward on that. Now, the bigger question of density and housing, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot that's happening just by right with state law. We do need housing. There's no question about that. I mean, one of the reasons why the rent is too damn high, and why LA has become so unaffordable, which means that your kids and grandkids can't live in the same neighborhood that you're in and that we're in, is because we don't have enough housing. So the question is, how do you incentivize the housing without destroying the neighborhoods? And I think we have a really great model for it here in the West Valley because of the Warner Center. That was the whole vision of the Warner Center, which is to really focus the density in one area and take away that pressure from the single family neighborhoods. I mean, we do have requirements from the state, they call RENA numbers, in terms of having to build more housing. And the question is, where is it appropriate? Along certain transit corridors, along certain major boulevards, in areas like the Warner Center where you can have growth. But I've also always been strong about trying to protect our communities and neighborhoods. You mentioned the ED1 situation. We had ED1, which is for those who don't know, is the executive directive that the mayor put out, which basically is to allow certain buildings, apartments, to be built essentially by right, without having the regular community input process. And while that might make sense in some areas, it doesn't make sense in single family neighborhoods. But the way it was written at first, the way the mayor had put it forward, it was a little bit ambiguous. And a couple of developers slipped in and got applications in under the ambiguity. And when I went to the mayor, and the other folks said, "Hey, people are applying in our neighborhoods. That's not what this should be about. You need to correct that." She fixed it. But then there was this legal question of whether or not the ones who got their applications in early could qualify for it. Now, I said they couldn't because, frankly, they snuck their applications in. They were sloppy applications. They didn't finish It was incomplete. They hadn't even said the number of units that they were going to have. I think there was a very good legal argument to say these were not complete. They're not vested. They don't have rights. They have to go back to the drawing board, and under the system, the way it has been clearly established, that it's not meant for single family neighborhoods.
And what did the city attorney do with that?
The city attorney backed that. We had a vote in council, so not all my colleagues backed that, but I got majority of the council members to support me on that, and we went to court. Unfortunately, the judge sided with the developer, and the judge said, "Sorry, the law wasn't clear to begin with, so those units that were under ED1 that were in those single family neighborhoods, of which there are a couple in our area, are allowed to get built." The city did the right thing in terms of taking it to court and saying that it shouldn't happen, but unfortunately, the judge did the wrong thing.
Well, all of this come about because of the mandates that's come about for how much housing we have to have in a specific area. That seems like that's gone by the wayside now with what's going on with the fires. I mean, that's destroyed thousands and thousands of homes, and I don't know that or anybody has an idea what we're going to do with those mandates now, as to what we've got to do and what effect it's going to have on development, whether or not indeed they're going to destroy the single family homes because they're going to say it's going to all be apartments. And by the way, this whole concept of being able to own your own property, none of these things are being built are ownership. They're all apartments being built. There's rarely any condos that go up any place.
I mean, what's your question is how that's going to apply in the rebuild?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I mean, there's talk about trying to suspend some of those state laws for the rebuild so people can rebuild what they have. There's going to be a tension. There is a tension between, expediting the permits, having built back exactly what was there, and building back to new standards and building back greater density. And so that's going to be that is part of the tension. A lot of that is up to the state in terms of whether or not they're willing to waive some of those state bills. But if they don't, then a number of those Palisade homes are going to be split lots, and they're going to be turned into multifamily.
Well, we hope that you're doing some work with both our senator and representatives assembly to try to make sure that they're going to end up at least trying to do some of that work, because
Right.
it needs to be changed over. You mentioned about the Rams. Have you seen anything about what they're going to be doing at this point in time? We haven't seen any formal proposals or any kind of an idea. Do you have an idea what they're going to be doing at this point?
I have an idea. I met with them recently to get a sense of it, and they say they're going to come out very publicly soon with what they're envisioning. They have not submitted a formal proposal of what they're planning, but they have as a base what Westfield had. So we all know what that is because that was very publicly vetted, and we all started. I mean, they're looking at that and but putting their own spin on it, and that's all I can really say. I got a 10,000 foot look of which they're going to supposedly come forward and put something public out there.
Are you aware that they're going to be trying to change a lot of what was done in the promenade planning?
I think that they're going to rely on the promenade plan for most of their entitlements, but are they going to make changes to it? Of course.
Okay. Scott, I think you got a question. You can unmute yourself. Nope, you're not there yet. Unmute yourself, Scott. There you
How
go.
about now?
Yep. you're
Okay.
good.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Scott.
So, couple of questions I have. Again, going back to certain things that you brought up. First, regarding the rent freeze, you did good today. I know that the Democratic Socialists on the board were pushing hard, but there was a business interest that really has been beaten down over the last number of years by this city council unfairly. And it was nice seeing a reasonable discussion, and it was nice that it didn't pass, because not everybody that owns a rental house is a billionaire, as the city council seems to assume. So you have a lot of small town landlords that really get hurt on this stuff. The last number of years with the 4% rent increase that was unallowed the years before really hurt a lot of these people that provide housing. So I'm glad to see that didn't happen. You mentioned the ULA that you were trying to see if they could use some of the ULA money on the fires. Now, the ULA money is known as the mansion tax. And right now, the ULA funds are bordering about $220 million when it was estimated it would be about $1.3 billion. And I could tell you that, as you know, I'm sure, that transaction speed is down 70%. And a large portion of that is directly due to the ULA tax. So that $220 million is a fraction of what you've planned on. If you determine that that tax is not working, will that tax be rescinded so the business can start again in the city of LA? Or is it just going to sit there and just take the money and stop transactions?
Well, as you know, it was not a vote of the city council that did this. It was a vote of the people. So, and in order for it to be rescinded, there needs to be another vote of the people. So if the voters decide that, this isn't working, then somebody puts on the ballot, either the council or by initiative, to scrap it, then that's what would happen. But it's not something that the council can do unilaterally.
So if the city is in such trouble financially, how did $200 million show up for the homeless complex? And the fire department, however you explained it, that there was money for the fire department, but where was this 200? Where did that come from to feed the homeless industrial complex that's going on?
I guess I don't understand your question.
I understand that they were. I saw another press conference where there was awarded, like, the budget will increase by $220 million for the homeless groups that provide services. I was just curious, how do you?
There's a couple things you may be referring to. There was a wage increase. Is that what you're referring to? In terms of the service providers, which then maybe that's what you're calling it, the homeless industrial complex. But the homeless budget is not. It's not like it's a straight city budget general fund. Like the largest chunk of it comes from what's called HAP, which is a state grant that gets passed through to the city. There is general fund, and particularly in the Inside Safe program that the mayor puts forward. So there is a certain amount of general fund that goes to homeless services, things like the tiny homes and the building permanent supportive housing. I mean, homelessness is still one of the biggest issues we're facing as a city. And obviously there's a lot of ways to deal with homelessness. One is to build affordable housing and to build permanent supportive housing and to build interim housing spots, and shelters. Like we've done a number of those things in our area. We talked last year about the 818 family shelter that was built by the county, but we talked about that's right across from Taft High School. That there were a lot of fears about that. That's actually been working out pretty well without negative interactions.
What about the extended living spot, Bob, that's right next to that the city was supposed to be doing? Nothing's happened with that so far.
I wouldn't say nothing has happened. It's actually been turned into a senior. It is currently being leased up. There are people living there already. It is a senior permanent supportive housing project. There was a snafu. It was slowed down for a little while because of a wage issue that apparently VOA, which is the nonprofit that's running that, didn't think that they had to pay prevailing wage. There was some case brought against them that they were supposed to be being paid prevailing wage. That slowed things down because they had to also change a lot of the units to be ADA compliant. But the bottom line is that is still, people they're currently leasing it up. I've been really pushing for as many people from our local interim shelters that qualify to get into that unit, because I want our local homeless population to decrease. So, my goal is
How occupied is that? How many available rooms do they have, and what's the occupancy now?
the total occupancy, I think, is 146 rooms
Available.
total.
Yeah.
Total of 146. I think there's a manager's unit as well. And it's, who goes in there is more controlled by the county and this, what they call the CES system. So it's been, without getting into all the details, but it's been it's been a slog to try to get our local folks into there, but we've
I
got
guess
so far.
what's really amazing to us is the 818 facility went up that the county ended up buying and giving it over to Hope of the Valley, and that's been up and running and been doing pretty well. And the place that's right next to it, the city's supposed to do something with, has just been sitting there, and it's run into all kinds of problems. And I'm wondering what's the difference? What's happened that's making this thing not work the way that it's supposed to be working? I mean,
Well, it will be working, and there are people living in there. It is working in that sense. Again, there has been a they're very different facilities. First off, because the 818 is what's called an interim site, so it has a whole different set of requirements when you're having somebody there for a short term, whereas the extended stay has to be built to a code that is permanent housing, because that is not that, but and that, by the way, is only for seniors. It was my insistence, as you may remember, we talked about this last year. They were originally going to try to do it and just put anybody in there, and I said, look, it's right next to this other one. We have all these other interactions. Let's make this just for seniors. I was able to make that happen. So you have to be, I know, 55 and older doesn't seem like senior to me, but so probably all of us, including myself on this call, qualify.
Thank you for that.
So they're leasing it up. It had two big issues that slowed it down in terms of the buildup. One was the ADA issues. They had to do a lot of renovations to make it ADA accessible for permanent housing, which is a much bigger deal than making an interim site ADA accessible. And then there was this other issue with the prevailing wage that slowed things up. But it is moving. People are living there and they're leasing it up.
And you're doing other things too. I know with the tiny home. I think you stayed in one of the tiny homes and spent the night in that, and had one of the meals afterwards. How did that go for you?
Oh, yeah. No, when the first one that came out, I mean, I wanted to experience it myself to see, what it really meant. And, it's perfectly comfortable. It's just, I mean, obviously those tiny homes, I call them cabins. They're not really homes. They don't, the restroom is not in the cabin itself. It's on the grounds. But they have, two fold down beds, air conditioning, heating, and it's perfectly livable. And it's not meant to be somewhere that someone's going to live for a long time. It's meant for someone who's been on the streets to be into a stable environment where they can get a caseworker, where they can be protected from the elements, get 3 meals a day, the service, and ideally turn over and either get reunited with family, get employed, get or if they really have so many issues they can't function, get into permanent supportive housing, and to move on. That's what those sites are meant for, as opposed to the extended stay, which is a long-term living site.
And you have to have all those combinations. I see we have a question on the phone from ending in 4340. Who do we have? Go ahead. You're unmuted.
You have Marty Lipkin,
Hey, Marty.
who can't get on the Zoom visual.
Oh, well, so we know what you look like, Marty.
Yeah, okay. My name's up there, but my face is not. Bob, I have a question nobody's asked within the entire city, I don't think. And I think it's key. We're doing all this stuff for the homeless, and now we have 1 trillion homeless people. But I'm talking about the initial homeless before the fires and everything. But we're not bringing in any business. We're not bringing in any. In fact, we're losing a lot of businesses. We're losing a lot of small businesses. We're downsizing other businesses. And my question is, where does the city and the county and the state think these people are going to work? And what are they going to do? Are they going to be permanent wards of California, of the city of Los Angeles? What are we doing to attract businesses so that there's something for them to do and some place to fill up some of these buildings? Okay,
Well,
I'll let you do it.
I agree with you. I mean, bringing business in is key, and gives me a good excuse to mention some very good news, which is what some of you may already be aware of this, but the old Catalina Yacht facility is going to be the home of CineSpace, which is a movie studio. So they're going to be, you talk about, what a great business to bring in. It was a big coup to get them. So we're getting some great things. We got the Rams coming, obviously. They're here. CineSpace is, major, well, not the big studio, but a good sized studio right here in our backyard. Is a good example of that. Obviously with after COVID, the many of you who are in this industry know better than I, but I mean the commercial space became much more available. Less people required a lot less of it. So now it's starting to come back, and we got to bring attract as many businesses as we can. I mentioned the CineSpace has multiple sound stages on it. So the more we can get both big businesses like that in and small businesses, the better off we're going to be. And I'm all about trying to do things, creating incentives, to make sure that we can bring those businesses here.
What's happening with Rocketdyne?
Rocketdyne, there's two Rocketdynes, but the big facility, the next biggest site we have in our area, immediate area, is obviously the Rocketdyne site. That has been the subject of many ups and downs. There have been companies that have bought it, and then they decide that it costs too much to clean it up, and then they sell it to somebody else. Right now there's no new, nobody right now has got a plan on Rocketdyne. I hear all sorts of rumors about folks who are interested in buying it and trying to get that to happen, and I'm hoping something will happen there soon. But at the moment, there's no.
Is the city itself doing any work with any kind of outreach to try to bring companies in from any place in the world, probably the world, I guess, at this point, to try to occupy? That's a very large piece of property. There's probably something that it could be used for, even with a contaminated state to it. There's probably some things, federal monies that are probably available to help clean it up. Is there anything that the city is doing to try to be proactive and looking for somebody, your office, or whether the city's got special departments, whatever? What's going on? Is anybody doing it? It should just sit there, and I don't even know if they're paying taxes on that property.
Well, certainly, we've tried a couple. Like I remember when Amazon was looking for a new facility, that was a possibility. I got the city to put together a whole proposal and a sizzle reel and all this other stuff. We almost got them to come into that, but that fizzled away as well. The hardest part with that property is the cleanup and the water board that's overseeing the cleanup, and the cost of doing that is what disincentivizes folks from. I mean, it is a prime piece of real estate in Woodland Hills next to the mall. I mean, it's got incredible potential, and we've seen a lot of people come and go on that, whether they were been a movie studio I know of was interested in at one point. Somebody was looking at an amusement park at one point. One point there was someone much more serious looking at basically putting a whole village there with office and residential and everything else. And but I think that was 555 that wanted it. They had an option on it for a very long time.
Well, it seems that somebody be able to do something on that. Again, to a layperson, it seems that they would just put a slab of concrete across the whole thing to seal it off. They could do something with it above that concrete. I just can't imagine that piece of property is going to sit there for that long a period of time. And if it's polluted, it needs to be corrected because it's probably affecting the people that are around it. I don't know what the pollutions really would be and how much it's encroaching upon other people that are around it. But if that's going on, that's not good. And something's got to be done with that. And again, it's a big piece of property. We need good commercial work out here in the West Valley. And it seems that somebody should be doing something to try to spearhead getting something done with that property. It's
and obviously, and the owners are sitting on it.
Yeah,
and they're losing money every day.
absolutely.
I mean,
Well,
so they need to either, they may need to price it differently. That's the other piece to it. Because if they price it the right way, then someone's going to buy it and be willing to do the remediation that they have to do, which is not set by the city. That's environmental regulators and
talk to us a bit about something that may be a bit kind of sensitive about the sanctuary city. The city council voted, if I'm not mistaken, unanimously to uh, indicate that the city of Los Angeles to be a sanctuary city. I remember years ago when I first started getting involved back in the 90s, the police department had, I think it was called Rule 40 at that point, which is basically that they weren't going to ask anybody for their papers, in essence, if they're being stopped and what have you. Talk to us about that. What was actually passed,
and that
and,
is,
and what was not passed?
I mean, that's the thing. Our rules have not changed. We have the same. When people talk about sanctuary city, I mean, some people envision the old westerns in a church, and you've reached sanctuary. Nobody can touch you here. That's not what it means. We have, basically, it's Rule 40, which was put in place by, of all people, Bill Gates. Not Bill Gates, Daryl Gates. It'd be funnier if it was Bill Gates, but no, it was Daryl Gates when he was police chief. Which is basically saying that our city is safer by not asking people for papers, by not because witnesses, when you turn the police department into an arm of immigration, then people are less likely to come forward as witnesses, report crimes, and we all end up being less safe. So that is at the heart of what people talk about the sanctuary city policy. That's what it really means. It doesn't mean that that we're going to interfere with the federal government. The federal government has primacy. They're able to operate, and I'm sure we're going to see them operating in the very near future here in Los Angeles. And there's not going to be a lot we can do about it as a city. A number of my colleagues really wanted to put this forward to basically codify what has been the rule for 40 years, which is this Special Order 40, which you referenced, because of all the fear that is being promoted in Los Angeles. Lots of immigrant communities are living in fear every day that they're going to be rounded up, and the idea of the city was saying, look, we have rules. We're not going to be turning the city into an immigration force. That's not what the city is about.
Yeah, initially, as I'm going to say it, back in the old days, and I guess to now, the idea was that if somebody, for example, was robbed, and they didn't have their papers, they were not here legally, that person wouldn't come forward, and therefore they were targets to be gone after, because they knew they wouldn't report anything, because as soon as they did, they would have a problem and be deported. And the rule from the police department at that time was basically, we want to make sure that if there's a crime that's been committed, that anybody will tell us about that. And we're not going to get them in any trouble for having told us about that. So we make sure there's not going to be crime around. But it's a different story with what we hear in other parts of the country, where somebody has been arrested who's an illegal alien that is, and I'm not going to use the proper terms for it, but that's what it is. As a lawyer, I'm telling you that's what the law says. That if there's somebody that's an illegal, is here illegally, and they commit a crime and they get put in jail, they should be turned over to ICE right away. That's what the federal government ends up saying, and that's for the security of our country. That has nothing to do with with the little kid that's in school, or the grandmother that's worried about being deported. Those are people that really should not have been here to begin with, and now are committing crimes. And we saw that with the new law that was just passed by the feds today, with the Lincoln.
And nothing in the city policy says we're not going to comply with warrants. The city will comply with warrants. Basically, all it says is the city won't use city resources to investigate, cite, arrest, hold, transfer, detain person for the purpose of immigration enforcement, except as authorized under California code sections. That's what it actually says. So, again, I think this issue has become more rhetoric for both sides of the issue. For the folks who want to point to Los Angeles as sort of being harboring folks, and then also for folks who want to show that we're fighting back against Trump. Like, both sides are using this rhetorically, but if you actually look at the words that are on the page, about what it means and what was voted on, it's fairly simple. And it's the policy that we've been in place for all these years.
I think we'll go ahead and we'll post that up, I think, on our website too. I think people should take a look at that and understand what really it's all about. And it's one thing to be going, for us to be going as a city or as a state to be going actively after people. That's part of what the federal government is doing and doing presently. And I think a lot of people are worried that whether or not the city is going to get themselves in trouble by standing and getting in the way of what the federal government's trying to do. And I think that
and equally, people are worried that the city is going to be co-opted into doing the federal government's bidding on this. And so that's where the law is trying to come down and saying, we're the city, we want everyone to come forward, whether it's crime or other issues, that we're not checking papers every time we do a city action. But at the same time, if there's a federal warrant, we're going to comply with it. If the federal government is requiring something, that there's nothing that's going to, the city is not going to be breaking federal law.
Fair enough. How safe are we? Again, we're hearing about all these potential terrorists and criminals that have come across the border, and I would assume that you sit at some point in time and hear some type of updates as to where we are with as far as whether or not there's any threats on the city, any threats at City Hall, any threats on the airport, or what have you. And I think that all of us saw that with the fires being set, ever bit, don't tell anybody that's something that would, if terrorists run around and set this place on fire, we'd be destroyed. What are you hearing as far as how safe we are in the city?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, right? I mean, I like to think we're safe. We have incredible public safety officials, both fire and police. But we live in a dangerous world. We are also, we are in a very fire-prone area, and we need to do everything we can to basically harden our targets, to make ourselves more resilient. It's not just fires. It's our energy grid. I mean, what an earthquake could do to us. We saw what happened with COVID and how that shut down the whole country. And part of it is to try to, do lots of things that make us more resilient, whether that's energy resilience through renewables and through, battery storage and other things, so that if something does happen in one area where energy is shut down, we have independent sources of energy and water. We want to be centralized, but we want to have be able to be decentralized when we need it. So, I can't speak to that, that bigger question of how safe are we.
Well, you're not hearing any, as they say, credible threats on anything that's going on as far as the city is concerned at this point. And we have the Olympics that are coming up soon, and you sit on the committee with that too.
We have the Olympics, we have the World Cup, we have a lot of really big events coming. At the same time, we're trying to recover from the fires, but we're also a really big city, and we really can do a lot. We're not. You think about the size and scale of Los Angeles. A lot of times people make these comparisons to other cities. Like one district in Los Angeles, our little district, the 3rd council district, is bigger in population than 99% of the cities in America. These are cities that have police departments, fire departments, councils, and mayors. Most cities are 40, 50,000 people. A typical district is closer to 300,000.
I know when I was working on cityhood for here back in 2000, the San Fernando Valley would be the 6th if we separated and had our own city. We would have been the 6th largest city in the United States overnight. And there's a lot of population here. We're a big area, and there's a lot of things that are going on. And it's I don't know how you do it, and it's going to be almost like whack-a-mole, all the things that come up in your office on a daily basis to try to figure out what you're going to jump at and what's going to be worked on.
But then the Dodgers win, and we all gather around, and we show that we can unite as a city. So there's a lot of advantages to being a big city too.
We do. Scott, you got another question for us? So go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, just if you would update us on the reimagined Ventura plan, the ice rink, and if you could also, you spoke about increasing business and so on, and City Hall is a blockade of increasing business to the extent the employees aren't working from the office. They're working at home. that's a significant impediment to moving business forward. And I know last year it was you mentioned when this question was brought up that it's a labor issue. Well, we're still waiting for people to come back to work in the city. Could you tell us if there's any progress in getting people back to work in the city, not from home?
Well, sure. No, most people are working. You know, there still is issues where people can work from home on certain days, but it's not. You know, most city workers are in city buildings working. Working their cities. I mean, you can find it. But let me start with the first thing you mentioned, which is Reimagine Ventura, which is whenever I mention, I want to give both you and Dennis credit. You guys were sort of the original thinkers on this of like, how do we create this sense of place? Especially given that we have, the village and others really kind of creating one great sense of place, and we're losing that Main Street feel on Ventura. I love that idea and give you credit for coming up with it at the beginning, and have leaned in to find funding, to have community meetings, to make it into what it will become. And I want to make sure, and it's a good reminder to invite all of you, that we're having a community meeting tomorrow night to talk about phase 2. So everyone to come out to the Woodland Hills Library from 6 to 8. That's when we're doing it. So just as an overview, the project is community driven, as I mentioned, initiative to change basically a 3-block segment between Royer and Sale into a neighborhood scaled Main Street that supports local businesses. And we're seeing a lot of changes, like you've seen the backed in parking spaces where folks back in instead of front in, which is sort of the newest thinking across the country. It's safer. People had a lot of concerns at the beginning, but it's working well now. Changes also include enhanced landscaping, other improvements. So phase 1 was installing the curb ramps, the new traffic signal, the street resurfacing, the pedestrian signals, reducing the speed, adding additional parking, and that phase has been completed and was implemented by DOT. And that also included the reverse parking, the roadway reconfiguration so that the number of lanes is tailored to the volume of the traffic. And then now we talk about phase 2. Phase 2 is the pre-design phase that will involve sort of the fun stuff: installation of the street trees, the street furniture, the upgraded sidewalks, the median, the upgraded curb ramps. And we've been able to find funding, for over $400,000 was provided in fiscal year 23-24 through the what's called the Capital Technology Expenditure Program. And the design is being done in-house by the Bureau of Street Services. Long story, they swept that money, but I was able to get it back. So that's all in place, so don't worry about that. And the main thing is come to the community meeting. It's scheduled for tomorrow night again, the library, 6 to 8. And that's when we can talk about, the more fun aspects of it, because the first phase was sort of the big picture stuff, but you notice it, but you're not gonna be wowed by it. Whereas the second phase, you're gonna be wowed by it because it's gonna have, the landscaping and furniture and things that you're gonna really change the way it looks. Does that answer your question on that? And then the ice skating rink, you asked about that. That's had all. It seems like every issue that someone could try to throw at it, they've tried to throw at it. It's like that. We have been tenacious about trying to keep it going. And it started out, as there was a line item in a Proposition K in 1996 it was $3 million for a ice skating rink and roller rink in Reseda. And it went through multiple council members before me where nobody could figure out how to make an ice skating rink out of that amount of money. And I went to, I think I've told this story, I went to the Department of Rec and Parks. I'm like, build me an ice skating rink. We've got money. And they laughed and they said they could build some ice cubes, but that was about it. Long story short, I creatively made a partnership with the LA Kings, got them involved. We ultimately found over $27 million. The project is fully funded. It's designed. It is in construction now, and it is. I'm hoping that we're gonna be on the ice next time this year when we're talking. We can do this meeting from on the ice. There's always the latest snafu had to do with the roof. You talk about the city getting in its own way sometimes. This is a perfect example because the city had required a certain type of roof, and then Building and Safety, as they're building it, said, we can't approve that type of roof, which made my head explode because how does the city on one hand say you have to do this and on the other hand say you can't do this? Anyway, long story short, that blip was the latest blip, but that's been overcome, and now we're in construction on that, and that had to do with the aluminum versus steel frame on the rooftop, the membrane that's going to be there. More details than you want, but the bottom line is they're finalizing things like the outdoor and indoor murals that'll be on it, some of the fun stuff. But that thing is going to go up. Once it goes up, it's going to go up very quickly. And if you drive by there, you can already see some of the walls that are up around it. So you can already sort of have a picture of what it's going to look like. But maybe we have this meeting next year. We all do it on the ice.
Be good. I have a couple of more questions. One from Bruce who wants to know why there's no parking enforcement on the south side of Ventura Boulevard in front of the Bolero Bowl. Big rigs, cars, carriers, and random vehicles are parking there for free from days on end, but there's no enforcement. What's going on with the enforcement stuff on some of these campers now that are still occupying our roads?
Well, it's hard to get parking enforcement out sometimes. I mean, we can do it. There's only 2 parking enforcement folks basically for the whole valley. So
there's only two guys that run around, or women?
There's cops, there's other people, but like 2 folks who are dedicated to that. Yeah,
Really?
There are we have like 3 RVs days a week. We try. I mean, there are days we can get traffic enforcement out there, to clean up the RVs that go out there, because there are we have gotten signs up there saying certain things are not allowed. So it's much better than it was, as you know, at one point in time.
Yeah.
In front of there, we had a whole lot of RVs and other things that were there. There's still the 72-hour rule that you can cite somebody, and they're obviously building that right next door. They're doing the construction there, but this is a bigger issue in the city about trying to get more enforcement on parking. We can pass, and we do pass these OVO, which is oversized parking restrictions. But when you're coming across an area that's a problem, call my office, call in Woodland Hills, call Seth. You guys know Seth. He's my field deputy, and we'll work with DOT to get somebody out there, and can always look into it on a case-by-case basis. I don't have the power to write a ticket, otherwise I'd do it myself. But we can work to get somebody out there, and when an area is becoming a problem spot.
Another question says, what's the best place to report areas that need to be cleaned? So I've tried my 311 and also called and written to the council office many times with no response.
So, to get something cleaned? What do you mean?
Something clean, the shrubs and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say both 311 and my office. Like we, in addition to the regular services, I've subcontract out with the LA Conservation Corps, so that when we have problem issues like that, I can send out the Conservation Corps to go out and help with those things when we don't have the city services to do it. So I have a separate thing. I have them working out of my district office so that we can get a lot more. Most districts don't have that, but I'm able to make that happen. If there's a particular location that you're referring to, let me know, and we'll work on it.
We've got some. Another question: why can't we have more condos that people can actually own and not rent? Too many people that are renters. No pride of ownership.
Right, and by the way, on the last one, I should say,
Yep.
There is some of the cleanups have been impacted by the fires because they basically sent out all the tree trimming and brush clearing. Even the Conservation Corps people, they're sending them all out to the Palisades to deal with some of that stuff. So at the very moment, we are very recently, since the fires, a lot of the resources that we had for some of that brush clearance has been put into the has been basically commandeered under the emergency order for the areas affected by the fire. I'm sorry, what was the other question you said?
It had to do with why can't we have more condos that people can own rather than rent. Too many people are just renters, and there's no pride of any ownership in these programs that are going on and these developments that are going on.
I love to see more condos. I mean, the apartment versus condo is a decision that's generally made by the property owner and the marketplace. So the question is, how can we incentivize as a city and try to find creative ways to incentivize that? But I'm with you. I want to see more ownership. This is a bigger question with the cost. Whether something will pencil out. To get a condo to pencil out is often more difficult than getting apartments to pencil out. But I think it's much better for a community and a neighborhood to have as much ownership as possible. In certain areas, like for low income, there's New Economics for Women has a really good program where they help subsidize it to make it easier for people to purchase condos and they're build those. But it's a market issue that's I don't have a silver bullet for it, but I agree with you on the concept.
It comes up with another question. This one's anonymous. Don't want to put the name on it. It says, why are the houses of worship allowed exceptions? Can they build 5 to 8 story apartments on their properties? I live near a very large church, and it would be absolutely ruin our neighborhood if they were able to do that. If you well know that there's a 500-foot radius that they're looking at around houses of worship that they're able to turn around and build in residential locations.
Yeah, that's again, that was taken out of the city's control. There's a state law, SB4, I believe, that authorized that. So I would urge you to talk to your assembly member and senator.
Well, there should be something we can do too on something with if the roads are substandard in a particular area that can't really apply, because a lot of these places are going to create real serious traffic problems. I think more than anything else. For any of those that are out there that are listening that have some quick questions they want to ask, I will put you online if you want. If you got some quick ones here, Bob has been very kind. We're a little bit past the 9 o'clock hour at this point. It looks like Marty. Is that you again?
No.
Okay. We have one. Oh, we have an iPadder. Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, sorry.
Hello, yourself here.
iPad 50.
Hello. Sorry.
Who we got?
This is Andrew Adlin. Sorry, I don't know why it's coming up anonymous or by my device. Technically challenged right now.
It's all right.
I actually sent in a question to the Q&A, but I don't think it popped up. Talking about police, Karen Bass, when she was elected mayor, promised that she'd hire more police. So I'm curious where we are with the number in the West Valley compared to when she was elected in 2022. Do we have more police in our area? If so, how many?
The numbers of police for the last 2 years has gone down. But it's not because she has been promoting it to go down, just the opposite. I mean, she supported the increase in salaries. The police department has been, really should be probably just to keep up with where we were a couple of years ago. It's probably about 12,000. We were shooting for 10,000. That was the number that Villaraigosa put out as the goal a number of years ago. But obviously we've been growing as a city. But we're down to about 8,200 right now. But to try to change that, last year, working with the police, we were saying, what does it take to get more folks in? Because we want to do it. And the biggest answer they had a number of things, but was more money, that we need to be more competitive. In fact, our average starting salary was, if you compared us to the 9 regions near us, we were the lowest compared to Burbank, Glendale, Long Beach County, et cetera. So it was time for their contract to come up, and they basically negotiated a very generous contract. So generous that it's actually, putting us in a very economically difficult position right now. But it put the starting salary, instead of being, I think it was a 72 at the time, into the middle of the pack, around 90 something. As we're never going to be Beverly Hills, where they start out at 125,000, but it put us in the game again to get more recruits, and that's been working to some extent. But the police are funded to hire as many people as they possibly can, because to get our numbers up. But they're not able to fill the classes. Each police academy should be, about 60 persons in the academy. But they're getting, they were before the raises, they were struggling to get half that. Now they're getting a little bit more than that, and the numbers are starting to, the numbers have stabilized. But that's the problem, and this isn't just a problem in Los Angeles. This is a problem across the country. It's harder and harder to recruit police for lots of different reasons, but folks aren't applying for as much, and we'll see. But the new chief, Jim McDonnell, other folks are trying to do things to really encourage people to be part of the police force, and again, the salary is about as high as it can get without bankrupting the city. Because as I said, right now we're actually in a very tenuous financial place because our revenues have not been keeping up with expectations, and the fires have just made that worse. People even talk about, will those contracts have to be renegotiated to ask for a give back of some sort? I don't know if that'll have to happen. Hopefully not. But it's not. I guess I'm defending Karen Bass to some extent, because it's not because she's been saying, "Oh, we don't want to have more police." That's not at all. She has been with those of us who say we want more police, and was willing to move on that contract, which is a big deal.
I have to ask you about how you're doing with the mayor now at this point. She had quite a bit of a hit that came on in the past couple of weeks, both with being, I don't know, ambushed at the airport, and with one of the reports that was going on there, and then taking some barbs from the president when he was out here talking about the fires. How is she doing as far as her leadership is concerned, and the abilities of you being able to cooperate with her, and she with the city council, and also how are you getting along with other council members now that we have some new members in there? How's that working out for you?
I'm generally pretty good about getting along with everybody. I always think you can disagree with someone and not be disagreeable. And so, we have the spectrum pretty broad. As you're referencing in the council, we have, the Democratic Socialist contingent has grown. It started with one, and now we have 4 people who identify as Democratic Socialists, and some others who get close to that sometimes. And that, I'm not going to say that's not a challenge, but it is. But again, I've generally been pretty good about being able to work with everybody, finding common ground. That's how I get a lot done for our community. And it's because I will work with the folks that are there, and I've got a good relationship with the mayor. I've known her a very long time. She and I were seatmates in Sacramento when I started as an assembly member. That was her last year as an assembly member. She was the speaker, and she was running for Congress. So I got to work with her a little bit then. So I've got a good relationship with her, and we'll work to make the best of our situation,
Well,
no matter what it is.
we certainly appreciate the skills that you use in very difficult times and with some very difficult people. I know that I don't know how you do it sometimes, and we deeply appreciate you continuing to work hard for our community here and making sure that this is the best place for people to be living out here in the western portion of the valley. You've been very generous with your time. We've gone over a bit at this point, so we do want to thank you at this stage. We want to remember people that are not members, please join us. You're going to go over to WHHO.com and join with us. Councilman, it's always a pleasure to be with you, to hear your thoughts about things, to hear how well you're doing, and hopefully that we can give you some encouragement in some of the things that are going on, and maybe even have some good ideas that might be able to help make our community even better as well. But we thank you for that. Continue prayers to you. Continue prayers to all those poor people that have had problems with the fires throughout the city and the county. It's just devastating. I worked on the Woolsey fire cases as a lawyer, and it's just devastating when that stuff comes through. You just don't know what it really is like. We sit back in our homes and have no idea what it's like to have smoke that's inside of your house and you can't get rid of, and it's in your clothes and in your drapes, even with those houses that haven't burned down. So our prayers go out to them, prayers to you as well, and to your entire family as well, to keep up the good work that you're doing here. We deeply appreciate your time, Councilman.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. It's always a pleasure. And it doesn't just have to be at this meeting. Anytime you have an issue, contact me, contact my team. We want to work with you year round. So thank you so much.
Thank you much. God bless. Good night to everybody. Thank you again.